Welcome back. I hope you're having a great weekend. I've had kind of a weird one, but we're going to focus a little bit in this video on international politics, politics in what I would call still the Commonwealth, despite every attempt to just destroy it by a lot of the people within it. And the European Parliament elections are going to be held this Thursday in all of the European countries that are members of the EU, including the United Kingdom, which remains as of right now an EU country because of the delay of Brexit, which was supposed to have happened in March. And it's clear that a lot of people don't like that. And whereas at the beginning, when you see some of these polls, before people actually knew that there would be an election in for this, because some people thought, oh, by this time the election will be, essentially people thought, well, there's not even going to be a European Parliament election in Britain because they'll be out of the EU. So at the time, Labour had a clear lead in the polls, mostly because of the total collapse of the Conservative Party, and then the second party. Well, the Conservatives at the time were the second largest party because they were considered the main Brexit group. And then, of course, you still had UKIP, which is still around but not very strong, largely because most of the support for UKIP has flowed over to the Brexit Party, which is Nigel Farage's group. Now, I will stress that if I had the choice, if I lived in Britain, I'm not telling you how to vote, but if I lived in Britain, I would probably at this point be voting for UKIP as well as for one of these. For example, a person who shall be called Robbie Thompson, for the purposes of this video, is running in the northeast of England. So, yes, the Brexit Party, if it wins, which it seems it can't lose at this point, I absolutely think that's not a bad thing. But the Brexit Party isn't as strong on issues of freedom of speech as well as being able to criticize certain institutions, certain ideologies and religions as the Brexit Party isn't strong on that. They're very focused only on Brexit, whereas UKIP I think gives a fuller and more comprehensive look at social issues in Britain, and that's why I would probably vote for UKIP for sure. Even though Nigel Farage, I think, helped save British independence by campaigning for Brexit for so many years. Now, I'll tell you what. So there's a YouTuber named Steve Turley, Dr. Steve Turley, who does a lot of stuff about what he calls trends, contemporary trends in what does he call it? Global trends in populist nationalism, something like that. He's talking about a lot of this awakening of populist nationalism and the end of the secular world and everything. And I think a lot of his videos are actually pretty brilliant. I think most of his videos are spot on in that respect. I think in addition to that, okay, maybe it's that, but I would say that there's this recalibration of values in many of these countries. If you if you look at a country like Australia, which we're going to get to, or a country like England or Britain, traditionalism isn't just a matter of religion, it's a matter of actual culture, the literature and the norms of the people there. And while things do change and there are certain modern innovations, there of course there was the swing era in London, swinging London, in the 60s when everybody was wearing those really funky outfits and everything. There still are innate traditional cultural norms in most of these countries, and social liberalism eroded that to a certain point, and now those are coming out of the woodwork. So I think it's not just a religious issue; it's a social and cultural issue that people are reacting to And yeah, I think many of his points on that are spot on. Although I think he is more focused on religion. So when you look at what's going on, what's the reaction to that? You have people complaining because the press in Britain is not as it might even be worse than over here. Maybe not by much, but these are mainstream newspapers, and they are trying to save the Labour Party, which is and by the way, the Guardian newspaper, it is traditionally affiliated with the Labour Party. A lot of dailies in Britain openly call out their own political biases. They say, well, we're more affiliated with the Labour Party. You'll see, for example, the Telegraph is more affiliated with the Conservatives, and the Daily Express is, more conservative than the Conservatives, so they would probably be supporting Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party. So the thing is that since 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn got elected the leader of the Labour Party, there's been a schism within the left, and the Guardian actually is a little more similar to some of the Blair style um, Labour people. They're very soft Marxists. They're Marxists who don't actually want to win. They don't want to really take over and run the country. They just want to talk about inequality. They even have a section that says inequality right here, and they want to talk about it, but they don't actually want to solve the issue because they're idiots and they support the European Union. And it's this party, it's this group of people that have basically handcuffed Jeremy Corbyn to the Remain side of the issue. Jeremy Corbyn, if it would have been up to him, probably would have had the Labour Party campaign to leave the European Union because he was always a huge opponent of the EU and the way that it was going to limit British independence. But he basically cucked really bad. And it says here this writer, Mary Calder, is I looked her up. She's a professor at one of these smaller universities over in it says here, well, actually no, it says London School of Economics. So my bad. I think I'm confusing her with something else. It says the European elections are of historic importance. Dangerous right-wing parties are likely to gain support, led by the Brexit Party. We need to defeat the far right and confront the spread of racism and the threat of authoritarianism and violence. We also need a serious commitment to tackling climate change and inequality. That has nothing to do with the European election. Okay? And that's why I think people are the reason that Labour is losing voters is because people who are voting for Brexit, they don't care about climate change. There's separate issues. Maybe some of them care about climate change, but they're not going to solve that by voting in the European elections because the European Parliament, for those of you that are unaware, the European Union has a parliament that is basically a rubber stamp. They can get up and they can make declarations and say, look, this is a bad idea. That's what happened with Article 13. Some people were saying, well, we're basically turning our continent into a police state because people are going to be dragged off for sharing memes. Which, by the way, I didn't really talk that much about Article 13, but I don't care anymore. I mean, it's that bad that Europe is essentially the new version of the Soviet Union. So you have people representing these countries in this parliament, but the parliament itself doesn't have any real legislative powers. Those laws can basically be overridden by the EU's executive groups, which I think they have the Council of Europe and the European Council, which I'm not exaggerating. They have like 3 or 4 committees that have names that are essentially the same, and those are where the real decisions are made. They're made by people who are either appointed or they're the leaders of countries within Europe. It's a joke. It really is a joke. And I speak as somebody. Look. I don't live in Europe, but I work in an industry that's affected a lot by EU regulation. And the idea that people would want to be controlled to the degree that they are by the EU, where they're asked to vote for something and then that vote is basically ignored completely, the way it was with the European elections almost every time, and then also with Brexit. It's just breathtaking. The EU is not a democratic body. So then she said the Party of European Socialists has released a radical manifesto, much influenced by Labour's 2017 general election manifesto. It is calling for an end to austerity, for a green transition, for a feminist Europe, and a Europe for the many. If Labour were to take these elections seriously, this could help shift the political balance in the European Parliament with a transformative effect on the EU and Britain. But Labour appears to be deliberately trying to lose the elections on May 23rd. The problems are both political and organizational. The political problem is that Labour insists on sticking to its fudged position on Brexit, despite the urgent demands of party members, Labour MPs from the right and left, and figures in the shadow cabinet, such as Keir Starmer, Emily Thornberry, and Tom Watson, for an unconditional commitment to a confirmatory vote on any deal. The current position satisfies no one in the same way that Theresa May's Brexit deal satisfies no one. The hardcore leavers will vote for the Brexit Party. The Remainers will vote for overtly Remain Party. So here's what we're talking about. Okay, most of my audience is in America, so if you're British, I understand if you might know what I'm talking about already, and I'm just, I'm kind of being redundant for you guys. The three people that she mentions, Keir Starmer, Emily Thornberry, and Tom Watson, are respectively the shadow minister for Brexit, the shadow foreign secretary, and the deputy prime minister, the shadow deputy prime minister. And those people are all heavy Remainers. What they want to do is force the British Parliament to vote to hold a second referendum on leaving the EU, and if they can, what this has been done before, when the EU has a referendum on one of its treaties or anything, sometimes it will get rejected, and then they force the country to hold a second referendum, and then they put their thumb on the scale by campaigning really hard and fear mongering, and then the second referendum passes, and they're stuck. That's the way it is. That's the way the politics goes when you're talking about the European Union. It's asking the same question as many times as possible until you get the right answer. And she's right in a certain sense that we'll get to that in a second. But the issue is that these people who are overt Remainers, who don't want the UK to leave the European Union, they are going to abandon Labour, because Labour is fence sitting. They're saying, well, in fact, I think she even quotes Corbyn down here saying that he doesn't want to be the representative of the 51% or the 48%, which are the two. The 51% were the Leavers and the 48% were the Remainers. So look, you can say that you're the prime minister of everyone, but at a certain point you still have to take a policy position, and he hasn't really. In fact, it says that they're focusing more on the Peterborough by-election on June 6th, which we'll probably talk about once this European election is over. It says, apart from Starmer and Thornberry, no shadow cabinet members seem to be on the campaign trail, and even when they do appear, no press coverage has been arranged. So what they're trying to say, a lot of these people, is that the Labour doesn't really care about leaving the European Union, because they're just they just don't have the commitment to the idea of the EU. And by the way, a lot of Labour voters are actually very heavy in the camp of leaving the EU. That's one of the issues that Jeremy Corbyn has to contend with. There's a large segment of the party's voting base that wants to leave the EU because they think that the EU is holding down wages, and they're pumping the country with immigration, that immigrants that are basically flooding the labor force, and nobody can get any jobs. There's no housing in the UK now. Everybody is talking about how the European Union is just a huge hindrance on the rights of workers in Britain. The thing is that a lot of these voters, they support Corbyn because they think he would be able to bring the UK out of the EU. What I can't understand is why they think he would be good, because he's almost pro open borders. He has no respect for the fact that Britain's health system is being overloaded by illegal immigrants, by a lot of these health tourists and things like that. People who come in, and not the health tourists that pay, people who just come and try to use the free healthcare over there and go back to where they came from. And now it's saying that polls makes they can't even write their own language right. Vince Cable's party the favorite for Remainers and puts it in first place in London. So the Liberal Democrat Party is at 12% right now. So they are the most pro-Remain party that there is. And in this poll, the one from before that, they actually lead the Labour Party, which is stunning, because in 2015, the Liberal Democrats were just destroyed in the general election and lost almost all their. I think they went from having 55 seats in the British Parliament to having maybe like 9, and they just fell apart, partially because they went along with the Conservatives. They formed a coalition with them, and they were essentially accomplishments to the austerity policy. So the Conservatives won that election going away because all of the negative the negative vibes from that government, the first Cameron government, were against the Liberal Democrats. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very rough ride for these people, the Labour voters, and there's already like there's a premonition of this from here. This is the Guardian. Again, I don't know why I keep using the Guardian, but they do seem to have a lot of articles on various topics that not every newspaper has somebody to cover literally every story, especially when you're talking about electoral politics. But the Guardian does, which is okay. Even though there's very few people who work there that I really think I'd agree with. And this is the election in Australia. People were predicting essentially the same way they were predicting last year here in the midterms. They were predicting a blue wave. There was a prediction that Bill Shorten would become the new prime minister, and they just didn't. It didn't happen. I think they even lost a couple seats, and the look on this guy's face. And the caption, too, it said, people are openly sobbing when Shorten gets up to speak. No one is consoling anyone because each person here seems to be in the middle of their own unique and terrible pain. So this was the same thing that happened exactly. I mean, they're saying in 2016, Britain voted for Brexit and America for Trump. In those countries, part of the national trauma was the realization that one part of the country was so ill-acquainted with the other part. Citizens stopped knowing each other. The polls got it wrong. The media got it wrong. People were so siloed in their own tribes and social media bubbles that the other side winning felt like a profound shock, like it wasn't meant to happen. The falcon couldn't hear the falconer and all that. And in those, I remember, that's from some poem, I think. And in those countries, it's only gotten worse. Part of the damage in the years since has been the hardening of the lines and divisions between these tribes, between red and blue. I think red and blue in the rest of the world is reversed from here. Here, the left wing is blue and the right wing is red, which makes no sense. In every other country that I know of, the red is left. Through the night, texts came in from people I know echoing the sentiment. Their fury was not with the Liberals, but with Australia. That their fellow citizens had chosen their investment properties over climate action. There had always been the thought that such a schism couldn't happen in Australia. If anything, we gravitate toward the middle, and for years both Liberal and Labour had such similar offerings that it hardly seemed to matter who was governing, but this election was different. There was a clear choice about the future, and for many people in the room on Saturday night, the fact that their vision for Australia's future was not affirmed made them feel estranged and alienated from their own country. Young volunteers I spoke with, the ones that have the most to lose, as in the climate, the natural world, said that the campaign did not go hard enough to the left. This too reminded me of America and the UK in the aftermath of Brexit and Trump. Outside it was freezing. The party was near the airport. It's technically, I think it's winter in Australia now. The party was near the airport and the hotel was ringed by highways and caught the cold winds. It was miles from anywhere. A man in a suit was outside talking into his phone and crying. This country's breaking my heart. I can't do an Australian accent. He said, I couldn't bear to go back inside. Sunday morning and I'm talking to my dad about hockey in this country. Are we doomed? Are we just like all the other countries where one half hates the other's guts? I asked my dad, but Dad said no way and quoted Bob Hawke at me. I want to be remembered as a bloke who loved his country and still does. I don't even know who's Bob Hawke. If you're Australian, just put in the comments or whatever. Another interesting thing is that this senator. Now I'll be careful this time. So Jacqui Lambie, I made a video on her probably 2 years ago, where she had a debate with this Australian, or actually she's Sudanese, but she lives in Australia. This Yasmin, whatever her name was, and it was about Sharia law. It was on Australian TV, and Jacqui Lambie just went hardcore, like I don't want Sharia in Australia and whatever, it was hilarious because this Yasmin, I think her name is Yasmin Al-Maghid, was triggered like all hell. And she eventually, this senator, she was an Australian senator. She had to resign over some sort of citizenship issue. And so did this guy over here. But now they've been reelected into the Australian Senate. And these are guys who are like really tough anti-immigration people. So you are going to see some change in terms of the conversation on immigration in Australia, because these people are back. And look, I'm going to play this. It's not because, look, the Jacqui Lambie fans, they started commenting the last time that, oh, don't disrespect our Jacqui Lambie. It's like, look, I just find her funny. So this is a clip, and maybe they've heard this like a billion times. This was her back in 2015 or so, 2014, talking about her ideal dude.
You haven't had a relationship for 8 years.
No, about 11, I think.
11?
Yeah.
11 years?
Yeah, that's why, not so worried about my waxing. I guess because I was physically and psychologically damaged, but for so long, and I was just, between, I guess, sharing the love. There was only sort of enough with my two sons, and I was just depleted. I had nothing else left.
Would you like Kim and Dave to find love for you? Like The Bachelorette?
Oh,
we find love for Jacqui.
Let's find love now. They must have heaps of cash and they've got to have a package between their legs, let's be honest. And I don't need them to speak. They don't even need to speak.
You don't want a man who speaks.
There you go. Jacqui Lambie likes a well-packed lunchbox. 1326.
So yeah, she knows what she wants. She wants like a huge, like a dude with like a huge dong and like a lot of money. So it's, look, I think that honesty in politics is a good thing. I think that honesty to this degree is an interesting thing to have. But I think, look, people thought for many years that you have to script these politicians. They have to come out there and I actually used to do this on my videos for a couple times. I tried scripting them out. It just didn't come out right. That's what they did with Hillary Clinton over here. That's what they've been doing with people like Theresa May, and I'm sure with some of the people down there in Australia. And it just isn't it isn't hitting right. Sometimes you do need like natural ability to connect with people. And yes, if it's somebody like Donald Trump, I don't know who the person in Australia would be the equivalent, but there are people down there that they don't want to hear some sort of canned response that was written by some staffer. They want to get the best representation of the idea and be able to judge whether they're going to support it or not. So yeah, I think congratulations to Australia for having the election and the people didn't listen to the pollsters, they didn't listen to the newspapers. I mean, Jacqui Lambie, people might think she's a joke, but the fact is that she lost her seat, got it back, and got it back while, the media down there is not, I've read Australian articles, and they're just not very sympathetic to people like her. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on YouTube, on BitChute and on Minds.com. Those are under the screen name @ChefLeopard. And you can find me on Gab @Starscream85. And also on Subscribestar if you want to donate a little money. It's also @Chef Leopard, and I'll talk to you later.